Are you good to go? Excellent. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Talk to Danielle podcast. I am your host, Danielle C. Baker. And before we get started, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to whichever channel you're listening or watching from. And of course, this is season 3, so I do invite you to go and check out the 2 previous seasons. There's some topics there that may resonate better with your realities today. So you can check those out. And today I'm really excited about having Anne on. So I have Anne Laurie with me. And we've talked before off camera about the work that she does. She does amazing work with especially language development. So I'm going to put the spotlight on her. Thank you so much, Anne, for coming on.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Yes, I'm excited. I just love it. Again, I could talk to you all day about this, so I'm going to try to restrain myself. But before we get started, can you talk a little bit about what you do and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, I am co-founder and president of TRICOAST Education. TRICOAST Education really stems from my PhD work, where I developed and validated an assessment called a curriculum-based dynamic assessment. The real need around it is stems from my going back even further is through my master's work, where I had the amazing opportunity to work with First Nations communities across Canada, from Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, New Brunswick, Labrador, PEI, and others. And one of my jobs as a little research assistant was to go to these communities and assess the children for on their literacy and language. And it was during these travels when I noticed that um, I had school personnel come up to me, principals and speech language pathologists, teachers, and they said, "Anne, can you develop a culturally sensitive language assessment?" And I was like 23, 24 at the time, and I had no idea what that was. So I said, "Oh, what is it, and why is this such a need?" And basically, they said, "Well, the assessments that we use to determine whether the child has a language disorder, what we call developmental language disorder, or DLD for short, they're just not made for our students. These assessments are normed based on often American English only speaking populations. And so, even if the children speak English only uh, as a language in these First Nations communities, their culture is so rich in language and a different dialect that is just simply not represented in the assessment, and therefore their performance may not be up to par or what is expected in a typical range. And so a lot of these communities, they were saying, like 75 to 80% of our student body had DLD, which is crazy because in reality it's 7.5%, which is about 2 kids per classroom, not 80% of the entire school. And so, that kind of shocked me a little bit. And when I was assessing the children, I could see this coming up. They had such rich knowledge about their lives and experiences in their community that is just not represented on the assessment. So I really did see it firsthand as well. And then I saw that message pop up in community after community, province and province. So I was like, okay, like there's a need here, and it's wanted. And so that's why I went back and I did my master's where I focused a little bit on speech and speech differences. But I knew that, okay, there is a need. I need to do something about it. And in conjunction, I was also working in the public school system as an educational assistant. And my role was to help children, Syrian refugee children, back in New Brunswick, where I'm from. In about 2015, 2016, we had the first wave of Syrian refugees. And before then, we didn't really have this influx of diversity in our schools. So the schools were a bit scrambling on, knowing what to do with these students who had to learn the language, which was like English or French. And I worked with some amazing children, but I just knew that, there was some of them that I was like, there is
Yeah.
something, and we don't know what it is. And so then I would go up to the school personnel and they would say, well, they just need more time. We don't have anything to really identify whether they have something. They just need more time. and
Yeah.
that did not sit well with me. So I was thinking of both experiences with the over identification of DLD and First Nations group and the under identification of DLD with Syrian refugees.
Yeah.
It's like I couldn't believe that there was such a large population just not being like their language needs were not being identified and met.
Right.
And so I went to Concordia University for my PhD under the supervision of Diane Pesco, who is lovely, and she's done a lot of work with assessments and multilingualism. So it was a perfect fit. And that is where I developed the curriculum based dynamic assessment, the CBDA. And that is it's a culturally sensitive language assessment. It is truly made for anyone as long as they have a little bit of knowledge, communication abilities in English or French because the assessment is in both languages. So we can assess the children in their second or third language. And now with TRICOAST, we're trying to bring this assessment to the people who would find it useful, whether it's speech language pathologists, privately or in schools, or resource teachers as well. You know, they're the ones who are often assessing children one on one, and they're with the children pretty much every day. So yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. And this is where the work really resonated with me, but both on a personal and professional standpoint. Because personally, I was going through a range of assessments myself from grade 3 to grade 5 or so. And was around the time where my mother had joined the army. So we moved from Quebec to Ontario, and I was only speaking French at the time. And now I was being assessed in a language I didn't understand. So, we always say we catch English. We don't learn English. You just kind of catch it when you're a child. You don't know how you learned English, but you do. But it wasn't enough for me to go through those assessments and those language assessments because it wasn't in my language. So I know personally what that's like to just hear words and you're thinking, I don't know what this means, or you can't express them properly because you don't have the
Exact
vocabulary.
exactly, so imagine if you had DLD,
Yeah,
and then you would be kind of stuck and you wouldn't have received the support you needed, like, you're lucky that you were able to
e-
catch on, and, be up to par with your
exactly.
peers, but gosh, like, for the 7.5% of the population who, who they'll feel stuck,
Yeah.
and, obviously, that has repercussions across the board, not just the child themselves.
That's right. Yes. So that's exactly it. And I've seen it as well for the same thing with the waves of refugees coming in, and they're also dealing with trauma. So already they're not open to talk necessarily. But then again, there's that language. So I think it's great. And this is where I love the work that you're doing because you've mentioned it's a dynamic assessment. Can you kind of walk us through the difference between the traditional assessments that we do in school? You kind of mentioned it a little bit in this, but what does a dynamic assessment actually look like? What does that entail when you're running it?
Yeah, sure. So, the traditional assessment, we can call them like performance assessments. The
Mhm.
purpose of a standardized traditional assessment is to basically identify where they're at on a certain task or skill. I work with storytelling, so oral storytelling. And so, a traditional assessment, what they'll do, you'll have the examiner and you'll have the student, and the examiner is very passive. They'll have their task and they'll ask questions, whether it's they're asking the child to retell a story or tell a story, and the examiner is not involved at all. They just mark down the scores, and then that's it. They'll go back, score it, and then turn those numbers into standard scores,
Mm.
which essentially gives you the number of where does that child fall um, alongside a normative sample or normative population. So when I was saying that's mostly American, English only speaking, that's kind of the sample that a lot of assessments have. So you can see why that's not culturally sensitive. You can have a brilliant student who
Mhm.
just doesn't speak English as their first language, and but their language skills just aren't there yet.
Yeah.
They might, but just not there yet. So that's why a lot of people don't use those assessments because they know that it's not validated for them. Dynamic assessment, it's not a performance
Mm.
assessment. We measure potential. And so it's a completely different approach. So my curriculum-based dynamic assessment, the CBDA, we use what we call a test, teach, test approach. So at first
Okay.
we have the test. So it's pretty much standardized. It's that part is where I'm the examiner, I have the child with me, and then I have pictures. And I have several pictures where the examiner can choose one that the child may be familiar with what's
Mm,
happening in the story, and also they might enjoy telling because we want to see where the child is at that point. The child tells their story. It's wonderful. And then the examiner, what they do next is identify two skills that were lower achieved. So, for example, let's say the child didn't put an ending to their story. Um,
mm,
that might be a really good skill to work on. Because the point of the dynamic assessment is not to see what they know, what they don't know, it's their potential. So that's what we're going to look for in what we call mediation sessions. It's kind of like
mm,
teaching sessions, but the purpose of this session is to not only see can we teach that skill and how much learning can happen in that little session, it's about 25 minutes, and what does that learning look like? So it's in that we can actually measure learning potential.
mhm,
And a big part of my PhD was actually developing scales that could represent potential. Because you can say, oh, learning potential, how on earth would you measure that? It seems so subjective. And that was a big limitation in research is that it wasn't objective enough. And so speech language pathologists weren't really using dynamic assessments to their full potential because they found it too subjective. So I wanted to turn that around and make really objective scales. And to dive a little bit deeper into that variable of learning potential, I'm looking really at three things. The first thing is examiner effort. So for me, how much effort am I exerting for the child to learn the skill? Is it a lot? I'm using a lot of strategies. I'm using modeling. I'm prompting, repeating, all that stuff. Is it really, really hard for the child to learn the skill despite all of my efforts? Or, you know what, maybe it's one explanation at the beginning and they're high flyers after that. The second thing
mm,
is child responsivity. How is the child responding to the teaching? Are they providing accurate answers? Are they like pausing a lot or are they confident with their answers? Um, how was their attention? So I have a few scales like that and all qualitative descriptors. So there's not like a 1 to 5. You really know which one that the child falls in. Lastly is skill transfer. So at the end of the session, after that 25 minutes, how confident am I as an examiner that the child learned the skill and can transfer it to different stories? So during that session, we work on their pretest story, and the children love it because it's their
mm,
story. You start with like, I want to read the story that you told me the other day or earlier today. And then you read it out loud and they get so excited. And then you work on it. Like, we're going to create an ending to your story. And then they can physically see because you write it down. Like, oh, wow, like my story just got longer just by adding that one piece of information. And
mhm,
when they can see that and start to visualize it, then it makes sense as to like why adding that piece of information is important for stories. And that's also something that we learn in mediation. And so, yeah, so we have two mediation sessions. We teach two skills. And then after there's a post test, usually the following day, because we want to see did the child really learn? So it's not just memorization. And we choose a different picture from those the five pictures that you can choose from, and then you can see, was there a difference? Were they able to add those two skills in their story?
right,
And so you can look at the pre to post differences, but that's not what we use to determine whether they're at risk for DLD or not. It's really that learning potential variable where I created those cutoffs based on the examiner effort, child responsivity, and skill transfer. So you can see it's a big difference from traditional assessments that are very much,
right.
scoring, getting that number, converting it
Yeah,
to a score that is basically means, is the child up to par with the normative sample versus
yeah,
looking at learning potential where we're not comparing the child to anyone else. We're really comparing them to themselves. So that's why we can assess the child in their second or third language because their abilities in their first language might be very high. And let's say their English might be down here. But you know what? Their potential will be relatively the same. And so that's why we can assess them in their second language.
Oh, that's amazing.
Mhm.
And yeah, this is what I like just because we're not comparing the child to others and it's not just a checkbox like, okay, yeah, they did it or they didn't. Um, I really like that approach. It's so important for the child as well that may be a little stressed out. There's a lot of pressure coming from the fact that they're being
Yeah,
uh,
no, and that's such
this-
a when I was developing the assessment and first collecting data, I was a bit worried. I was like, will the children like the assessment? Will they think it's boring? Will they be anxious? And because you're working with them and they know what they're working on, and I think that's a big key is at the very beginning, I explain what we're going to be working on. So, for example, story ending and why
Mhm.
it's important for stories. So from the get-go, they know what's expected out of them. And then they're already learning why it's important because some children are like, why do I have to learn this? Well, if you know from the get-go um the get-go when explain that, well, story ending is very important to for the story to have closure, the problem is solved, then they begin
Yeah,
to understand, oh, okay, I get it. Now I can learn it because I know why it's important. And so
yeah.
they learn that at the beginning, and then when we work on the skill with their pretest story, and then we go to another story, and that's really dependent on the child's interests. It can be a personal story. If you see the child loves telling personal stories, well, ask him to tell them an ending to something that happened to them the other day. And we can
Yeah.
work through that. So, and then we can even see, is the child, might be more comfortable with personal stories rather than fiction stories, so, based on one picture. You can use any other type of story as well. So within that, you're learning about the child as a learner and what's their motivations, their interests, and their strengths, weaknesses, and all that. So yeah, it's just the wealth of information that I was able to get from this type of assessment where the children actually really enjoy it. And I even had fifth graders in my sample. So my PhD was kindergarten to grade 5. The assessment now is up to grade 12. The end of high
Wow.
school and end of high school in New Brunswick, and we can use it with them. But I had some children come up to me and said, "You know what? I had no idea. The teacher would always say, stories. You have the beginning, you have something happens, and then the end. But I never truly understood what that meant." And I was really surprised of the amount of children who said that. And we call that
Mm,
narrative schema. So understanding how to structure a story. And when children can understand how to structure a story, it's so much easier after that. And I found that the children who had DLD, they had trouble with their narrative schema,
mm,
understanding how to structure a story and why those elements were important for stories. So that's why it's actually one of my scales in the learning potential variable. Do you understand the importance of this skill in stories?
right. I love that. It's so interesting. I just stay on this, especially storytelling, because it comes so naturally for children. And you did mention that I mean, originally it was to be more culturally sensitive assessments, and you've explained quite a bit. But can you kind of tell us why it is so important now more than ever to really take that into consideration when you are assessing children with their development?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our world is becoming more diverse every day, especially in a country like Canada, where we know that the assessments just simply aren't for these children, for many of these children. And so, if you have a child who is in the school system and they're struggling, and okay, we know we need to learn the child needs to learn the language, but what do we
Mm,
do with them? And then so if you can identify their learning needs early, we all know that early intervention is key. So
yeah.
with an assessment like the CBDA, we can go in much earlier and identify their needs a lot faster versus standardized assessments where they say don't even bother for 2 years until their language abilities have reached to their peers. And so if the child does have DLD or is at risk, then they can get the resources necessary for them to have the best chance to succeed, not just academically, but socially as well. And of course, when you think of um, teachers and resource teachers and all the school personnel who works with the the child, if they understand the child's needs, then they can
Yeah.
better serve and teach them with the right strategies and the right interventions. And of course, for parents back home, they have the confidence that their child is receiving the right help and that the school is doing their best.
Right. That's the confidence that is so important to say, you see the results, you see that the school is seeing your child for who they really are. I think that's wonderful. And you mentioned that it goes beyond just the language development. And when we've talked about this when we first met, but I wanted to bring it up is you've noticed change in behaviors in the children when you use that approach as well. So can you kind of explain to us what you've seen in terms of when you do get the right support and the right resources that the child needs or the family needs or the teacher needs. How does that affect their behavior, whether they're in class or you've noticed some changes in in the behaviors. So can you
Oh,
tell
yeah,
us a little bit? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So DLD, it's a communication disorder that affects one's ability to understand and or um, express themselves. And so
Yeah.
you imagine if you have DLD and you can't get the words out right, or you're having trouble understanding what the teacher is saying, or what you're with your friends and they all say a joke but you don't get it.
Yeah.
Like you become stuck. You can become very isolated and you think you're dumb, or you're so frustrated because you're trying to explain, your needs and no one's getting you. Then
Hmm.
the behavior can start. And there's been studies saying that like 80% of children with behavior difficulties at school actually have language difficulties.
Wow.
That is an insane number. And
Yes.
I mean, I can't speak for everywhere, but I can speak from back home that a lot what it is happening is that we're treating the behavior, but we're not treating the root cause. You're treating the symptom, you're not
Yeah.
treating the root cause. So if you have a child with behavior difficulties, maybe you can assess their language. Maybe it's just because they're struggling to really express themselves the way they want to. Because children with DLD, they know what they want to say.
Yeah.
They just can't get it out effectively all the time. And conversely, if they have trouble understanding and they just sit there quietly and they're slowly failing, and then self confidence drops,
Yeah.
anxiety, depression, all like so the numbers for anxiety and depression is also quite elevated, um, if they have DLD. And so
Hmm.
when the child has that diagnosis, then they say, "Okay, now I understand, why it's difficult for me. I'm not alone. People can now understand why it's a little bit more difficult, or why I need a little bit more time before I give an answer, or why I might speak a little slowly."
Hmm.
And then they feel more confident that their friends will get them, their teacher will be more compassionate to maybe create a safer environment for children with DLD to, whether to have more time or to give them more time uh, giving an answer or on the test, or things like that. So the
Yeah.
behaviors can definitely change when you actually assess their language.
Yeah. That's where I see the dynamic assessments being so important because you get to see another side of the child that's not just the linguistic part of it. Or when you said that number, I was thinking because I've seen the reality in schools where there are quite a number of behavioral issues in the class. And a lot of it, when you start looking into it, could just be the fact that you not able to either you didn't quite understand because it's also the listening part, right? uh, didn't quite understand what was asked of you, or like you said, you just can't express it, and that's frustrating. Just even as an adult, if you're trying to explain something to somebody and they don't get it, you're just like, come on, so it's totally normal for a child to go through the same thing. So I was blown away when you said that at 80% of those behaviors are just kids not really understanding or able to express with it. It can be very frustrating. Um, Leads me into because you have books that come along with the program as well, and that's the also an explanation. I mean, it's wonderful for the storytelling, but can you explain a little bit more about the books and how they are important for the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you were to tell me a year ago, were you writing children's books? I would have been like, absolutely not. That's, we're focused on the assessment and all that stuff. But
Mhm.
um, the books came about because when we were talking to school personnel or school districts or even, departments of education about DLD, they kind of just glossed over and they didn't really understand it. And we realized, oh, they don't know what DLD is.
Right.
They know dyslexia, they know ADHD, they know autism spectrum disorder, but DLD, despite it being extremely prevalent, very few people actually know what it is, and so they're not going to buy into an assessment they don't really if trying to sell a solution if they don't
Yeah.
understand the problem, if they don't know they have a problem. And
Yeah.
so we were trying to find, as a team at TriCoast, we were trying to find ways to raise awareness around DLD. And it was actually our team member Robin. He's an amazing illustrator, and also does marketing for us. He came up with these characters. He said, "I have something to show you," and he came up these little characters, and he says, "I think we should write children's books." And I
Mm.
was like, "Well, I don't, it's not really on our radar." He says, if we want to raise awareness, we have to make it tangible for everyone. And this, we can get parents on board because everyone loves a children's book.
Of course.
There's, the colors and the characters and stories. So I said, well, let's give it a shot. So
Mm.
between Robin with the illustrations, me with my expertise in narrative development, and of course DLD, we partnered also with a woman named Karen, and she is a former speech language pathologist, but now works with children's publishing.
Mm.
So the three of us together, we wanted to create books that were not only teaching about DLD, but giving concrete strategies that are actually used in therapy, but in a fun way.
Right.
So right now I have two books. The first one's called Drew and the Magic Pencil, and the second one is called Lily and the Magic Notebook. So there is a little bit of magic theme going on there. But every
Mhm.
single book, um, and there'll be more, has a mantra. So in Drew, it's breathe, wait, take your time. The words will come. You'll be just fine.
Oh, wow.
So because we know that children can't learn if they're not regulated.
Hmm.
So let's, breathe, let's take our time, and then let's try to get the words out after that. So the books have a mantra. They also have a tool. So Drew, we have the pencil. Lily, we have the notebook. And then we have strategies. Drew learns that with his magic pencil, he can draw the most beautiful drawings. And with his drawings, he can get his message out in a way that people can understand him. So it's his own unique way of getting his stories across. And with Lily, with her magic notebook, she has trouble following directions. Everything kind of gets mixed up in her head. So she learns to simplify the steps and write them down in order, and also advocate for herself, saying, can you repeat that, please? Or can you say it in order? So she learns how to self advocate, where Drew learns to accept help from friends, and then practicing together can give you the best outcome. And then at the end of each book, we have a call to action to kind of reinforce the child who's reading the book to kind of keep going with the activity. So with Drew, we say, grab your own magic pencil and draw a story, then tell that story to your family and friends. They'll love it from the beginning to the end. And so kids are really excited with that. And with Lily, we kind of give a little notebook 2-pager and say, if there's something you like to do, follow the steps to guide you through. Or I think that's
Yeah,
what it
I
says.
love it.
So to kind of, okay, now you read this cute little story. You've learned, oh wow, like I can use different tools to get my message across or to understand. And now let's practice. So everything in this book is extremely intentional, and the
Mhm.
illustrations are gorgeous. That's one of the big things that we're big piece of feedback, or people are loving the characters and loving the illustrations to go with all
Oh,
the education piece behind it. And also, we create parent and teacher guides that go with the books. So if you want to teach your child about DLD using the book, we have a guide that is on our website that you can download. And yeah, just to help you, and even if your child doesn't have DLD, it builds empathy. There was a parent was telling me that their child told them that she's like, you know what, there's a kid in my class that speaks like Drew. I thought he was just weird. I didn't know it was DLD.
oh,
So,
wow.
right? So it's like it's building empathy. So these books are really for everyone.
Yeah,
I've had feedback from parents who their children are on the spectrum or have ADHD, and he says, "She's like, I my child is in these characters."
yeah.
So it's just really nice to get that feedback to know that maybe we're making a little difference with these books that at the same time we're raising awareness, and that's one of our goals at Trico's Education.
I love that. And I do love, so I've noticed is we put a lot of focus on the child who may be struggling, but we forget about the rest of the class, and so the inclusion, the integration can be difficult sometimes too. So just sensitizing the other kids to the fact that we don't all think the same. You don't have to name a condition, but just say this is just the way our brain works, and it's just fine, right? And it's just, I love that it reaches everybody too, and it's
Yeah,
beautiful
exactly.
work.
Because bullying numbers with children with DLD
Yeah,
is obviously higher than in whether if the child was typically developing. And so
yeah.
when you can build empathy with everyone else, I mean, everybody wins.
Exactly. And if it's learned early on, then it
Yeah.
just makes it a lot easier when they get into high school, even or junior high, or yeah, it's oh, that's beautiful. I love that work. They sound great. I'm already attached to these characters. I just love it. Uh, is there anything new coming up? Do you have any projects or anything that's coming up that you can share with us?
Yeah, so well, we're still the Lily and the Magic Notebook just came out about a couple weeks ago, so we're super excited with that. So we're still trying to get the word out that hey, we got a second book, but we also have a first book, and we have a coloring book that goes with it. So we kind of have like the little trifecta for now. So yeah, there'll be a little bit more work there. Also in September, we're going to be launching kind of our assessment, like 2.0, if you wanted to say, based on feedback from speech language pathologists and resource teachers who have been using our assessment the past year. They've gave us really, really good feedback on how to create a really good report that will be useful to them and but also school personnel and to parents. So we completely revamped the report. The assessment is now on an online platform. And so
Yeah.
when you fill out all the data, a PDF report spits out, and that's kind of what we've been working on all summer. So we're really excited to share that with others or other potential users. So we'll be yeah, working towards just contacting people who may want to use it and to support their children. And of course, keep on the book side where I'm going to be writing the third book as well. So the goal is to have it out before Christmas. So we'll see if that
Oh,
works out.
wow.
Yeah.
You're gonna be so busy, but this
Yeah.
is amazing. It's so much. Oh, it's I love it. It's a
It's
lot to
easy.
look
It's
for.
easy when you're passionate.
Yes, and when you're having fun with it, right? You're
Yeah.
just like, yeah, oh, I get it. I just love it. And before we give the information to people, if they want to learn more about your work or where they can get the books or all of that, I do ask a question to my guests before we wrap up, and that question is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I love this question because I feel like I often say, "Oh, like that's who I want to be when I grow up," or "That's what I
Yeah.
want to be when I grow up." But I think in general, I want to be a leader in this space. I want people to have that built-in trust with Tricos education, where whether it's through advocacy or assessments or interventions, we would love to be the go-to company for that. So for me, I would kind of love to be at the head of that. I'm an academic. I'm still an academic. I'm doing a postdoc, but turned entrepreneur. So that entrepreneur side of things, that's yeah. I think that's what I want to be if I'm when I'm old or older.
Older. when you're wiser. That's the
Wiser,
word I'm using
exactly.
when I'm wiser. I love that because we are lifelong learners, right? So we just keep learning, and I love that. And there's such a need for that in our field in this world. So it's beautiful work. Thank you so much for sharing. And of course, now I'm going to ask you where people can reach you, your website, or any other places where they can get the book. I will add that information in the description, but can you share those with us?
Oh, thank you so much. Of course. So our main website is just tricoasteducation.com. So everything we do in English, we do in French. So we do have a French side to our website, and yeah, everything we do in English, we do in French. So even social media, we can be found on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky as well. So we're very active in not just showing, like what we do and what we're up to, but we also want to raise awareness. So we create like little blurbs or little images to kind of say, hey, like, did you know about DLD? So if you want to keep learning about DLD, like, please follow us, and reach out to us as well. If you want to write us an email, it's at just info@tricoasteducation.com. And for the books, they are found on Amazon. We have the books in English, French, and Spanish.
Nice.
And so, yes, Amazon. And also, if you want to order them from your local bookstore, you can absolutely do that as well.
That's amazing, and I'll be sure to put that all on there
Oh, thank
for
you.
people to go back and find you. So I do appreciate. Thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, I could go on forever on this topic, but I just love the work that you're doing, and it's so there's such a positive outcome to it that I just get excited. So thank you so much for sharing that. And is there? I'm going to put you on the spot. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
Oh gosh, I think oh, October 17th, if this comes out before October 17th, is DLD Awareness Day.
Oh,
And so if you want to learn more, there's a lot of websites and resources that you can use if you're a teacher. Maybe you want to do that, a little awareness day in your class, or if you're a parent, you might want to, um, you know, read a book and teach DLD with your child. And so yeah, October 17th is DLD Awareness Day. So we're gonna be on our socials we're gonna be promoting that as well.
I love
And
it.
yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. I thank you very much. And again, I'm going to invite everybody to go and have a look, go check the website, get those books. They're amazing, even for an adult. There's things
Yeah.
that we don't learn, right? We're not taught this in school. So it can be very helpful. So thank you again. And for everybody watching, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to whichever channel you're listening or watching from. Don't forget to go and follow TRICOAST Education as well, to get some more resources and help that you need, all this support that you need. And until next time, stay safe, stay awesome, and we'll talk soon.